as the Chicago Bulls keep going through this offseason, an offseason that they've already said is going to bring about some change. Now things shift towards Zach LaVine after the Alex Caruso trade with a reported growing market for Zach LaVine. We're going to discuss that and what could be next for the Chicago Bulls in that area. And then KCP is interested in coming to the Chicago Bulls. Does that make a little bit of sense? We'll talk about that as well and dive into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Terry Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. So, reportedly, Zach LaVine's trade market is growing. This one comes from Joe Cowley, who says this. According to a source, Bulls also feel there is a growing trade market for Zach LaVine, with a handful of teams feeling that they have no shot at the several coveted free agents that will be out there. Or teams hoping that the Bulls sell. So, when it comes down to it, it's this, right? Is what I want to say when it comes down to this. Is that I think that when you pair this with what Casey Johnson said earlier in the week, as far as the Bulls have made about 15 possible, trade calls on Zach LaVine, and you hear that now the market is growing. Well, I've always said that the Zach LaVine trade market and the doubt in his value was a little bit overstated. There's some serious concerns there, right? The contract being one of the biggest ones. Zach LaVine is a productive player. And I think as teams are looking to make moves this offseason, that Zach LaVine can be a backup prize for a lot of teams if they miss out on the players that they want first. But also I want to throw this in, that with the Chicago Bulls doing the Alex Caruso in the way that they've traded, I'm sure that trade interest has grown because it could be very well possible that a lot of teams around the NBA are now looking at the Bulls and saying, hey, you traded low on Alex Caruso. How much lower are you willing to go for Zach LaVine, right? And that teams are circling now the Chicago Bulls, wondering if they can be the next carcass that they can pick apart to get the pieces that they want, because they are hoping or seeing or hearing that the Chicago Bulls are planning on going younger, that they do want to offload a lot of their veteran pieces to go younger and maybe be bad for a while to take that longer-term step forward, all those type of things. So it doesn't surprise me that the trade interest is growing or the trade market is growing for Zach LaVine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the deals are getting better, right? And I want to make sure to point out that there is a big difference between that, right? So while the market may be growing, the market could very well be what it is and growing because teams are seeing the Chicago Bulls now operating from a place of weakness and may think, now I'm not saying that the Bulls will, but may think that, hey, the Bulls are probably going to sell low on this player. And Zach LaVine already having the contract that he has, which is going to be a big, get for any team as far as just that size of a contract, over $40 million. If you cannot send as many assets as maybe what the Bulls were initially hoping for, what they were hearing that the Bulls were wanting, that trade market is naturally going to grow in a case like that. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case. Maybe Zach LaVine's trade market is growing because teams finally realized and stepped away from the narrative that, hey, Zach LaVine is not a bad player. And especially if you're bringing him in to be your number two, God forbid if you're bringing him in to be your number three, that Zach LaVine can thrive in that role, especially if you have structure and if you have a solid defensive system around him. The narrative around Zach trying to talk like he's a horrible player, no. But if you want to have the conversation that his production, the injuries and things like that don't match the contract that he's on, that's very well a reasonable conversation that you can have. But for a team that could be desperate, or not necessarily desperate, but for a team that could be looking to add an offensive scoring punch and you strike out on your free agents, that could be the thing. Now, we've already heard that the Philadelphia 76ers maybe have moved on. They're looking at other options other than Zach LaVine. We've recently heard that the Sacramento Kings are maybe the front runner to land Zach LaVine for a deal built around Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, and maybe the 13th overall pick. It's been a lot of back and forth in what you hear in regards to that pick being included in that trade. But, maybe the 13th overall pick. And here's what I'll say. That's not a bad trade. Now, we did hear a version of that trade that included Alex Caruso, which now that Caruso is traded means that he can't be part of that deal. But to pivot that, to say could the Chicago Bulls very well still make a move with the Kings? It's possible. I do think that with the talk of Malik Monk re-signing with the Sacramento Kings or being open to re-signing that deal, then maybe it could have some impact on the Zach LaVine interest there. That's unless the Sacramento Kings are willing to go all in on offense, which they very well may, right? Malik Monk is a player that comes off the bench. So if they look at Zach LaVine as that starter and think, hey, we can have some high-powered guards, Moses Moody has not started a game in 3 years. The last time he started a game is when he played for the Los Angeles Lakers in 2021-22. So if they are looking at him as a coming off the bench player, that's the most games he started. Before that Lakers run, he had only started one game for Charlotte in 2019-20. He's come off the bench the rest of his career. So if the Kings are looking at Zach LaVine as a starter next to De'Aaron Fox, you then have Malik Monk still coming off the bench for you. That changes some things, right? So maybe that the Kings are the front runner, but I'm not going to put all the eggs in the Kings basket. Much like with Alex Caruso, we heard a lot of permutations on trades, and it didn't end up being the one that he actually went to, ended up being none of those, right? So not to say that some of the deals that we hear rumored aren't deals that actually come about, because they are in certain cases, but I think ultimately it comes down to just this. The Bulls listening or shopping or actively trying to move Zach LaVine, one thing has remained constant. Zach LaVine, more likely than not, is not going to be a member of the Chicago Bulls by time the season starts. And there's still some Bulls fans that are holding out hope. There's still some Bulls fans that look at the Bulls going younger and saying, hey, if they do truly go younger, Vooch and DeMar are gone, could they keep Zach as kind of being the veteran and the big contract on that team? But I think that the Bulls have said and shown us what they want to do. And if they have their goal, they're not going to have Zach LaVine on this roster by the start of the season. And what deal we get back in that's going to be the thing that to look out for. But I've told you guys for quite a while, I think that everybody is going to be initially disappointed by the Zach LaVine package, especially hearing how some of you guys have reacted to it a little bit, but in your hopes for a Zach LaVine trade deal. But when it comes down to it, the Bulls are looking for change. And whether the Kings are the most likely suitor or other ones, Zach LaVine is a backup option for teams that are going to strike out on the player that they may covet first in free agency. But with that said, if he's a backup option, that means that Zach LaVine may not be traded at the draft, right? And now, as I love the fact that the NBA has opened up the re-signing period to now that you can re-sign your own free agents, because, as players like Pascal, as players like Malik Monk, as players like maybe a Paul George, whoever, re-sign with their teams before the draft even happens or before the start of free agency, it could mean that some of those teams could pivot to Zach LaVine maybe earlier in the process than what they would have in previous free agent years. And so that's something to watch in this case as well. And so, we're hearing some teams that could be out. Like I said, we heard that the Philadelphia 76ers could be out now on the Zach LaVine deal. I still think he could make some sense there if they strike out on everything else. But we'll see what happens with it. But, if the Bulls do end up with that Sacramento Kings deal, the Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, some future draft picks, whether they're protected or not, if that ends up being the case, it's not a terrible deal. But it's not the knockout deal that a lot of Bulls fans are hoping this is going to be. It just kind of sets us on that path that it seems like we're already kind of on. Now, one of the things that came out yesterday that doesn't really jive with that path is KCP reportedly being interested in joining the Chicago Bulls. Jake L. Fisher saying this. Therefore, Caldwell Pope would seem at present to be the veteran in line to benefit from Magic's cap space. Caldwell Pope is also believed to have a potential home in Chicago should the Bulls ultimately lose out on Williams, in addition to Philadelphia viewing the veteran wing as a backup option. So when you look at that, it says this. Right now, it seems like the Bulls are on the path of going younger. There are some people who still think that the Bulls are hoping for that they can get some type of deal done this offseason to where it's a soft rebuild and to where they have enough, they hold on to enough to still remain competitive this season. And if they do, Caldwell Pope could be somebody that the Bulls do look at in that case. To me, it really doesn't move the needle. If Caldwell Pope ends up being the signing by the Chicago Bulls, he's a 31-year-old player. He averaged 10 points per game last year. He did that on 46% shooting, and he did do 40% shooting from three last year. He actually is a 37% three-point shooter, taking 4.5 over his career. But I think ultimately when you look at Caldwell Pope, especially them listing him as if we strike out on Patrick Williams, if Patrick Williams doesn't leave, to me, I would not mind, because you still want some veterans on your team. Let's say that we do get rid of Vooch. We do get rid of Zach. Even if DeMar does stay or not, you still want some veterans on your team. And Caldwell Pope is the type of veteran that I don't see him upping the ceiling of the Chicago Bulls in any type of way that it would keep the Bulls from maybe going a path of trying to keep their top 10 pick or whatever else it is. But, that's just something to look at, right? And ultimately, the Caldwell Pope talk around the Bulls right now doesn't seem to make sense with the path that it seems like we're on, but we've only seen really one move to kind of move towards that path. Yeah, a player like Torrey Craig, now that it was announced by Forbes Sports that he is expected to opt out soon, whatever that is, I don't really see that as, it's not something that really changes the direction all that much, but we'll see what happens with the Bulls. We'll see what direction they do go on this offseason, but ultimately, I do feel as of right now that going younger is probably the best bet for the Chicago Bulls. But, the Bulls do seem like they're in a place to maybe completely reshape their roster. And so, that has reinvigorated a lot of hope in Chicago Bulls fans, right? Some are not liking this at all and, thinking, hey, let's go out and get this veteran and that veteran. And, at the end of the day, all I want to see is that if AK and Eversley pick a path, one path, and move down that path, see it through. And let's see what they can bring us. But with that said, it is Saturday, so that means it is Mailbag Day. We're going to go ahead and get into these voicemails. This one's from Matt.
Hey, what's going on, man? It's Matt from Waukegan, man. I'll be honest with you, bro. I think you actually may need to start getting on the other side of this hotline and accepting calls live instead of letting them go to voicemail, bro. I know you don't get paid to be no therapist, but I might need a therapy session. I think we all do. I might be the first one calling. Not sure. Ain't no fucking way, bro. We did not just get rid of Caruso for the Giddler. For the Giddler, bro. I am at work, hiding, losing my fucking mind. But I mean, I guess the question is, it's the only one left, I guess. The beg to ask is, are we heading for full tank mode? We just got rid of Caruso late and got no draft compensation when we could have got way better stuff. AK and Mark Eversley are making guard and Pax look like Jerry West, as I've seen SBN Ricky say on Twitter. I thought it was hilarious. I don't see how when you get rid of Caruso for Giddey, who, yes, is 21, it does have upside, I got to give it to him, but he is the Giddler, and you just got rid of your main trade chip to package with LaVine to maybe get off for LaVine and maybe get something more for LaVine. Are we heading into full tank mode to keep this pick in 2025? Did we just get rid of Caruso for Giddey to also be able to waive and stretch Lonzo and get off LaVine and just basically get nothing back for any of these pieces and just be fucking dog ass so we keep our pick in 2025? I mean, that is what this is screaming to me now. I thought maybe there was a chance we were going to turn it into the young players and start over. Now I think we might be heading back to the Wayne Selden. Who else is on that fucking starting lineup? I'm just losing. Paul Zipser, I'm losing my mind, bro. What do you think about that? I mean, like I said, I don't want to hate on Josh Giddey too much just because of the shit that he was accused of and whatever, even though it's terrible, especially, if it's true. It's absolutely horrific. But he is 21. He's size. He does have a lot of skills. But I think he might be headed to full tank city, man. What do you think? All right, Hayes, man. You take care. See you, man.
Well, I think a lot of Bulls fans are upset over the Josh Giddey Caruso trade, and a lot of the things that hinge on that is not getting a pick. And I understand that. I even said in both the initial breaking news video, the live stream that we did after it was announced, and then the daily episode the day afterwards talking about the trade, that not getting a pick would definitely completely change the view of that trade. But I think that people are looking at the not getting a pick and then also projecting that on Josh Giddey. Is Josh Giddey a perfect player? Is he a player to build your franchise around? No. But to act like Josh Giddey still doesn't have tons of upside is asinine. He does. Now, is he going to have the type of talents where you're looking at him and saying, hey, this is the guy, we're building everything around? No, he's not going to do that. But for a player that when he was the point guard, like averaged almost a double-double, a triple-double in 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists, like that's not production you can just look at and shy away from. Now, the talk about how he didn't perform in the playoffs and all that is true and valid. Do not get me wrong. But here's what I'll say to that as well. This Bulls team isn't going to probably be a playoff team next year. So the 82 games in the regular season is what I'm looking at the most when it comes to that. And he's still a young player that still can increase. When you look at it as well, at the last 2 seasons almost played 80 games both in those seasons, right? A durable player. So if you're going younger, Josh Giddey is the type of player that, to me, you want on your team if you're going younger to see what you can get in him. Now, is he going to develop to an all-star? Maybe not. We'll see what happens in there. The Bulls also don't have necessarily the best development, right, as of right now, the history of that, but I don't pair that. I can separate how disheartened I was that the Bulls didn't get a pick, some type of pick back for it, but they also did get Josh Giddey, though, and Josh Giddey, as I said, would at minimum go top 5 in this draft, and that's just reality. And so I get it. Yes, I would have loved to see the Bulls get a pick, but I'm not going to let that step away from looking at what Josh Giddey is and who he can be, and I separate that a little bit. Now, I'm not sure that the Bulls are tanking yet, and I don't think they're going to tank. Are they going to get younger? Yes, tanking is different than getting younger. I think that the Bulls, from what they may do, may get younger and naturally just be a team that doesn't win a lot of games. Tanking to me is that you're actively removing any talent from your team and hoping you're going to bottom out for a number 1 pick. I don't necessarily think that that's what the Bulls are doing here either, despite that that's what some fans would like to see the Bulls do. But we'll ultimately see. Next up, let's go ahead and get into this next voicemail. This one's from Mike Jones.
What's up, Hayes? It's Mike Jones. First and foremost, as always, man, thanks for all the great content and everything that you do with Chicago Bulls Central. So obviously, I'm calling right after the news dropped of the Josh Giddey, Alex Caruso trade. First and foremost, I'm of the mindset that it's a great move. Not necessarily from the sense of what Josh Giddey can be, but just the Bulls just finally deciding, like, man, like, okay, we either going to try to, hopefully this move leads to them saying we finna try to go younger and get younger talent and stop picking up all these old guys. And then secondly, Caruso was very coveted by a lot of teams. If my mind leads me to, okay, so then now that you traded off basically arguably your biggest piece and Alex Caruso, how does that hinder you from potentially making a trade and trading Nikola Vucevic or trading Zach LaVine? Because a lot of teams probably would want to pair Alex Caruso with LaVine or with Vucevic in order to make those deals too. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. Let me know, bro. All right, peace.
Yeah, listen, the Bulls may finally be deciding to get younger. Maybe, right? One move so far, the Josh Giddey one, you trade a 30-year-old player for a 21-year-old player, you're getting considerably younger in that. We got a draft pick also coming into this draft. For the Zach LaVine trade, we may get veterans there. Now, they could be expiring vets to help support the young players, but rather if the team as a whole is getting younger, I hope that we're seeing that the young players are prioritized more. In not Zach LaVine, in Kobe White, Ayo Dosunmu, Julian Phillips, Dalen Terry, right? Adama Sanogo, maybe even. Like, to see what we truly, Patrick Williams, to see what we truly have in these guys. And if you do, let's say the Bulls do prioritize their young guys, they play a lot of minutes, and we do end up still winning 35, 38 games, whatever it is. To me, then you are looking and you're saying, all right, we did that because of our young guys. It's a little different. And then if you don't and you bottom out, okay, bet. You get to keep your pick. You now know, hey, these guys ain't ready. And so it's a lot to be said in that. It does seem like the Bulls are going younger, but let's see what the next couple of deals bring about before we say that for sure. But it does appear that we're going that route. Great voicemail there, Matt. Let's get into this next one. This one is from Matthew.
Hey, this is Matthew out here in St. Louis. I was just giving a call, of course, on regards to that goddamn Giddey trade. My main issue, the court case, all that. Hey, I'm going to leave the legal with the legal. My main issue is compensation for Caruso and then overall fit with Giddey, right? So, once again, we don't know exactly what the exact trades were. We're not in these front offices. We can only go off of what they say on Twitter, Bleacher Report, places like that. But it was sounding like the Bulls had a very good chance of getting multiple first-round picks, or at least like a first and some seconds for Caruso coming up. Well, not coming up, but for that trade deadline. And if we pass on that to then trade for Josh Giddey, that's insane. My main issue with Josh Giddey is that he, besides passing in this current moment, he's not good at anything else on the court. I mean, passing and rebounding. Besides passing and rebounding, he does not do anything else good on the court. He's below average everywhere else. He is not a scorer. He's not a defender. He's not somebody that can play off the ball or anything of that nature. And he fits best with a team that has athletes and shooters. And we're one of the worst shooting teams in the league and one of the least athletic teams in the league as well. So unless they, over the next year or so, because we also have to remember that Josh Giddey is going to be up for an extension, his rookie extension, because he's going to be a fourth-year player next year. That's another issue. We have to worry about paying him in like a year's time. So it's just, unless this Bulls team is going to make a complete 180 and really go deep into the youth movement with shooting and more athleticism, I don't know how this trade makes sense or helps the Bulls, right? Once again, if they're going full rebuild, okay, cool. Hey, we can take a chance on Giddey. Worst comes to worst, we let him go to a restricted free agency next year and then sign and trade him elsewhere, right? So cool. But if they're going to try to still bring DeMar back, we're going to have the absolute worst floor spacing team in the league. Our offense is going to get even worse. So, I just called because I got to get this shit off my chest. Because I hear people saying that Giddey is good, and it's like, no, Giddey sucks, right? But hey, he's young. He's 21. He might become better, right? And since we fucking traded for him, I hope he does become better. But current Giddey, I don't know, man.
I mean, the fit with Giddey is hard to see right now because there's so much up in the air about the roster, right? We don't for sure know what this roster is going to look like. So because of that, I can't necessarily say in a right mind that what his fit is going to be. I will say this, a Kobe White, Josh Giddey backcourt, it excites me a little bit, right? Is it still a very flawed backcourt, especially defensively? Yeah. And even if Josh Giddey ends up being the first lead guard off the bench, which if he wasn't willing to accept that in OKC, I doubt he's going to accept that in Chicago, but maybe a trade's a wake-up call. But we don't really know what this team's going to look like yet. There's still a lot up in air about this team. So I can't say what that fit is going to be yet. Best believe, though, as this roster starts taking more shape, I will be doing those videos. We'll be looking at how that fit's going to go about. But regardless of the fit on the overall roster, you're getting a player in Josh Giddey that can play make, that can score a little bit. He can't shoot, right? But that's the thing. You're not looking at him as being a big-time shooter. But you also get him to work with Peter Patton, him to work with the player development department. We get to see what's going to come about that. We'll see. A great voicemail there from Matt. Let's get into this next one. This one's from Michael Korn.
Hey, happy Thursday evening, Hayes. I don't think we'll really be able to judge how good or bad of a trade Caruso for Giddey was until next season when they're playing, right? And see if Caruso plays more than 50 games, and let's see how Josh Giddey fits in with the Bulls and how the roster will be. But I'll tell you, I am excited for two reasons about the trade. One, I'm glad the Bulls were the first team to strike in the trade market. Setting the tone, I think, is really important. So we'll see what happens next. And the second reason that I like Josh Giddey, 6'8", that's, and watching him against the Bulls, he was always good. Yeah, he has his moments, of course, but I like the fact the Bulls are going young, and that's coming from a geezer. By the way, listen to your show, and your analysis of the trade earlier on YouTube. Thanks. That was great. Especially when I go look at Bleacher Report, man, they're super negative. Last thing, shout out to your caller, Korn. Couple days back, you made him a wager. I think he should take it. Worst case scenario, he wears a shirt that says Hayes was right. But I think Zach Giddey is going to surprise a lot of people. The guy's an athlete, man. He'll develop a three. He started basketball pretty late. I've been watching some bio stuff on him and reading a little bit about him. Anyway, I'd actually like to see him more than Donovan Klingon, or whatever his surname is. Anyway, I'll talk later. I'm sure you're going to get tons and tons of comments on what's going on. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, listen, I agree. I can't really judge the Giddey trade just yet, right? As far as, because this trade in of itself, like I said, the OKC Thunder won the trade, right? If you're just looking at who got the best talent, who got better, that's the OKC Thunder. No question, no doubts about it. There's not even up for discussion. But in getting Josh Giddey, you are getting a promising player, and you may be also picking your path, and we'll see what happens with that. So the Josh Giddey, depending on what moves happen next, not to say that it makes that trade necessarily look better, but it could make the fit of Josh Giddey be a little bit more seamless depending on what we do. Now, as far as Zach Giddey, you know how I feel about Zach Giddey. I'm not big on Zach Giddey. I don't think that he's going to be anything special in the NBA. That's my personal opinion. But listen, the IQ part of it, you can't deny. The work ethic part in it, you can't deny. And if he does develop a three-point shot, hopefully it's quick, because right now his shot's extremely slow as well. But for where it seems like the Bulls are going, I don't think Josh Giddey fits that. I think it's something more like Khalil Ware, Kyle Filipowski do. But hey, we'll see what the Bulls do. Again, hey, nobody had this Caruso trade peg, so I'm not going to act like I know exactly what the Bulls are doing either. Michael Cornin, thank you for your support, bro, and always supporting me and always turning out, man, and I appreciate that as well. And we're going to keep delivering the best content here on podcast and YouTube for the Chicago Bulls. That's what we're going to do. All right, let's get into this last voicemail. This one's from Dave.
Hey, Hayes. This is Dave. Big fan. Love all you do with the podcast and the show on YouTube and all that stuff. Really like how you take looks at like the big picture kind of thing. And I was just thinking about this Giddey move with Caruso, and I'm just wondering, is this, you think, that DeMar basically just told the front office, like, there ain't no amount of money I'm coming back for? You know, maybe he wants to go play in LA, maybe he wants to play for a contender. It's just because it came like right on the heels when you can start really negotiating with your own guys. And, you know, we had that offer for like, what was $40 million for 2 years. He didn't take it. And, you know, I love DeMar, but there ain't no way he's getting more than $40 million for more than 2 years anywhere else in the league. So, you know, do you think he basically went to them and said, listen, I am not coming back. You're not going to make me come back. I want to go home, or I want to play for, you know, Boston. Well, not Boston. They can't afford him, but you know what I mean? Somebody who's playoff bound, somebody who's going to be high level, somewhere he can win a ring. You know, he ain't going to be on the timeline here if the Bulls ever get to that point again. And so maybe they just said, all right, he's gone. Dak's gone. We got to go younger. Like, they were kind of put in that situation where, you know, there's no, let's get rid of DeMar, let's get rid of Zach, and then we can get a bunch of, you know, 30-something established stars to come back in and play with who? With Vooch? You know, like, I don't think there's any free agents out there who are sitting there thinking, you know, I really want to go play for Chicago where I can sit and, you know, sit next to Javon Carter and Vucevic and try and make it to the 8th seed as our championship at that point. So maybe they just said, all right, screw it. You know, we're going to go younger. Caruso, I think, is from North Texas or Oklahoma. So it's probably like, hey, you want to go home? We loved what you did here, so we'll do you a favor. We'll get a 21-year-old back. You know, Giddey's not exactly MVP or anything like that, but I think he can fit real good. He's great at passing inside, which is something the Bulls have not been able to do, hit cutters or anything like that. So that's just my thought. Is I think what it came down to is Mar basically just said, I ain't coming back. And at that point, they had no options but to go younger. So just let me know what you think. If maybe I'm way off on that, or maybe, you know, it seems like something that might have happened. I don't know. Just keep up all the good work and go Bulls.
This is an important question, and I think it's one that not a lot of people are talking about yet, is that what if the Bulls pick this path because they know DeMar isn't returning? Or maybe they pick this path because they know they don't want to bring DeMar back. They try to make their $40 million offer, and we've seen the Bulls do that in the past. And this is a different front office, right? But Bobby Portis got his deal, right? The Bulls offered him a contract. He turned it down. He was traded. Same thing with Lauri Markkanen. The Bulls made their offer to Lauri Markkanen. He didn't accept it. They eventually traded him in the following offseason. So it's not anything uncommon for a team to make an offer, them to realize, hey, the player didn't accept that, and then say, all right, bet, that's what we got. We're going to start moving on, moving in a different direction. And maybe the direction that the Bulls are going in, it's something that DeMar doesn't want to stay around for. DeMar may be wanting to compete. And right now, with the way that the Bulls roster is going, giving up Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey, who's a more raw prospect, right? Potentially getting rid of Zach LaVine to get role players back, right? Torrey Craig leaving, Andre Drummond leaving. DeMar may be sitting around here realizing, hey, I'm playing. Like, what are we doing? So, you know, the money, the years, whatever is the biggest drawing point for DeMar DeRozan, winning could be that biggest one. And if he does want to win and have a chance to win a title before the end of his career, right now the Bulls don't look to get anywhere close to that. And DeMar, over the last 3 years with being with this Bulls team, has proved one thing. He is and still can be a very productive player. Does he need a specific roster around him to maximize that? Yeah, but DeMar DeRozan is still a player that can win you basketball games. And because of that, some teams may be willing to bite on it. And we'll see. We'll see what the future ultimately holds for DeMar DeRozan. If I had to guess, I mean, it seems like not. And I know a lot of Bulls fans still want to try to keep DeMar, and I understand that, right? I can understand even if the Bulls, with moving all the older people. You still want to keep a DeMar DeRozan around as the veteran leadership, but then you got to think, is that what DeMar wants? Or does DeMar want to compete? We'll see what comes about that. But great voicemail there from Dave, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.